If I could turn back time, I would start sandbag strength training as a teenager. Why? Because this kind of training lets you get more out of life. Sandbag strength training makes everything easier. It strengthens the body, sharpens the mind, and takes care of your mental health. It protects against injuries and helps to make life more enjoyable. Some time ago, I started a sport I would never have had the courage to try without this foundation. With an injury rate of 5.5 per 1,000 hours of training and an injury occurrence among practitioners of 70 to 90%, starting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in middle age is not an obvious choice. But after years of sandbag training, I knew, or rather felt, that I was well protected. My musculature is developed in ways that go far beyond what training machines with their rigid, specialized movement patterns would have allowed. Sandbag strength training is comparable to elementary school. Most of what is on the curriculum there is actually useful for the rest of your life. No specialization, just the broad foundation that, with some effort of your own, can be enough for a successful life. Sandbag strength training serves you not only in every moment of daily life, it also prepares you excellently for almost any sport imaginable. What makes the sandbag stand out as a training tool for life? Does it have an advantage over other strength training tools, dumbbells, machines, kettlebells? What I explain here, using the sport of my choice, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, ultimately applies to almost every sport. Sandbag strength training builds a foundation that hardly any other training tool can match. The mechanism. Exercise machines for building strength and muscle mass work. You can build muscle and get stronger with them, but only along the rigid path each machine was built for. These devices make strength training easier and safer, and that makes them particularly useful in rehabilitation when you want to carefully and gradually rebuild a leg, for example. And of course, you can build big legs on a leg press. The applicable strength gained this way is severely limited, however. The moment you work with free weights, you feel how disconnected from reality those machines are. They develop one-dimensional strength that holds up poorly against real-world demands. What about barbells and dumbbells? The demands are significantly higher. There is no guidance, no safety mechanism. You have to balance and stabilize the weight yourself, and of course lift, push, press or pull it. Anyone who has built strength with free weights will immediately feel, the moment they sit down at a leg press or a Smith machine, how restricted machine training actually is. Free weight training is widely considered far more functional than machine training. And there is that controversial term again. Which movements are functional and which are not? We will come back to that. Training with dumbbells and barbells offers high functionality compared to machines. They work for hypertrophy as well as for building strength that transfers to various sports. But those types of weights also leave a lot of potential for strength and muscle gains untapped. There are many reasons for this. I will explain two of the most important ones. The awkward load. Working with barbells and dumbbells requires stabilization, but it remains predictable. That is exactly how the barbell was designed, for the most efficient and convenient handling of weight. There is a reliable and comfortable grip, usually right at the center of gravity. Few objects weighing 100 kilos are easier to lift than a 100 kilo barbell, not just in terms of raw muscle strength, but also in terms of technique. The bar with its weight plates positioned far out to the sides allows you to keep it close to the body. By contrast, simply grabbing or holding a sandbag, and I always mean models without handles, is a challenge in itself. The bag deforms and the sand shifts. The center of gravity is not clearly defined, and throughout the entire lift, these parameters keep changing. In any case, the center of gravity is far from the body. All these variables demand the use of muscles that barbell work barely touches. With the sandbag, no two reps are alike, which means clean form remains pure theory. A nightmare from the perspective of modern, so-called science-based barbell training, where form is always precisely defined. While barbell training always trains the exact same movement, or at least strives to, that is simply not possible with a sandbag. And that shows in your progress. Mastering a 60-kilo sandbag in all situations typically takes longer than mastering a 60-kilo barbell. 60 kilos of sand feel significantly heavier than 60 kilos of iron. The sandbag is awkward and unpredictable, just like the challenges of everyday life. The solution to a real-world problem is not always obvious, and while you are working on it, the problem is already changing. That demands constant learning and the sharpening of new skills. Sandbag training brings this challenge into the purely physical world and trains precisely those muscles that have little to do during predictable movement patterns. This becomes clear to me in the martial art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Every training partner is different weight, height, proportions, center of gravity. And even within a single match, fighting style and physical condition can change. Sandbag training prepares me for these demands far better than the comfortable barbell. And that ultimately applies to every sport in which you compete directly against other human beings. Now for the second essential reason why sandbag training taps more potential for strength and muscle gains. The internal torque chain. I covered the topic of torque chains in detail in an earlier video. The short version, the concept of internal and external torque chains, was developed by Julian Pineau. He does not look at movement execution and muscle groups alone. Instead, he breaks force production down into two muscle chains. Anyone who wants to apply force biomechanically correctly and as efficiently as possible, whether jumping, deadlifting, or pressing overhead, must build tension in the right way. This works through either internal or external torque. What does torque mean in this context? You occasionally find cues like knees out for squats, or imagine you want to bend the bar for bench press, or imagine screwing your feet outward into the floor. These are fragmentary attempts at cues that help you build correct body tension and move loads with more safety and performance by using twisting tension. The internal and external torque chain give these fragments a complete framework. What does this have to do with a sandbag? A sandbag without handles naturally demands the use of the correct torque chain. The fragmentary and often misunderstood cues become unnecessary. At the same time, the body tension the sandbag requires goes much further and aligns the biomechanics of the entire body optimally. How does the sandbag do this? Again, it comes down to the particular nature of the sandbag. The absence of a comfortable grip. If you want to deadlift a 120 kilo sandbag off the floor, you have to bend over, reach both hands underneath it, squeeze your arms together, and only then can you lift. Biomechanically, deadlifting a sandbag is fundamentally different from deadlifting a barbell. On one hand, this leads to higher long-term performance. On the other hand, the injury rate decreases because correct body tension is always present, or at least much more likely, and imbalances are avoided. And this is not magic, and it's not foolproof. There are truly world-class fools out there. But as a general rule, a beginner starting strength training can hardly go wrong with sandbags. With barbells, without proper instruction, bad habits form quickly. Consistent training of these muscle chains as a whole increases safety and performance in every movement, including in sport, whether that is BJJ, football, or the sack race. A brief detour. What is functional? Functional training ultimately stands in contrast to the isolated training of muscles on machines. Bench press, squat, deadlift with a barbell are considered functional because they train movement patterns relevant to daily life. Where exactly the line is drawn, however, is debatable. Many proponents of functional training argue that a bicep curl is not functional because it involves only one joint and focuses on one muscle. But if you look only at the number of joints involved, you can make a bicep curl functional in an instant by raising the upper arm slightly during the contraction and involving the shoulder. Beyond that, I perform a bicep curl in daily life every time I carry a bag of groceries and lift it onto the table. There it is, functionality. At the same time, one might ask how everyday a movement like the bench press actually is. Lying on your back and pressing a heavy bar upward. I cannot think of a situation where that comes up, even though I obviously see the value of the exercise. The same goes for all movements performed with a barbell. The center of gravity kept close to the body with the weight distributed far out to the sides. But of course, the classic powerlifting movements with a barbell are functional in their own way. For that reason, I try to use the term functionality only with a direct reference point. Sandbag training is significantly more functional than barbell training for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and for most sports in which you compete directly against another human being. BJJ as a concrete example. What exactly transfers from sandbag training to the mat in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Take wrapping around an opponent, which I use in the clinch or on a takedown. My arms have found their way around a 60-kilo sandbag 1,000 times. My hands have locked together blindly behind it. I have lifted the sandbag or carried it in a bear hug carry. It is the same movement as in the real thing on the mat. When I lie down next to the sandbag for a floor press, I pull it from the side onto my chest. I use the same movement when I pull an opponent over me from side control or kisakatame. But it does not have to be that obvious. Every sandbag bear hug squat trains my legs and hips with a load whose center of gravity is variable and far from my body. That prepares me for a bridge, an upa, better than any machine. The essential value of the sandbag, however, lies in the torque chain concept already described. The sandbag helps you learn to apply the correct torque chain in every movement. That increases performance and protection against injury across the board. Add to that the handling of a dynamic, unwieldy load whose center of gravity is constantly shifting and which I can pull, push, press or safely throw in any direction. That is direct, ideal preparation for any fight. A barbell cannot do that. This applies to almost every sport. Anyone who does not find a movement in their sport, their work or their daily physical life that resembles sandbag training should look at it through the lens of the torque chains and will find the connection there at the latest. Correct and complete engagement of the internal or external torque chain is always useful, or rather essential, for maximum performance and reduced injury risk. Working with the sandbag trains exactly this. A barbell, and especially exercise machines, cannot deliver this in the same form and versatility. I once asked myself whether I could really train my whole body with a sandbag the way I had with a barbell. The answer became clear quickly. No. The sandbag does not train the body like the barbell. It trains the body more thoroughly, because sandbag work stimulates musculature and balance that the barbell simply does not require. As a result, the sandbag made me significantly stronger and more muscular than barbell training had, with lower weights, less joint stress, and faster recovery. I used to think of the sandbag as a supplementary tool to my traditional barbell training. After just a few workouts, it was clear it is the other way around. The sandbag is the real deal. It engages far more muscles and reliably stimulates correct body tension. Beyond that, this training is simply more enjoyable, at least for me. It is more demanding and feels more true to the body. The barbell is now the supplement. A matter of probability. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we talk about low percentage moves. Those are techniques that succeed with low probability. They usually look spectacular and attract beginners, even though they not only rarely work, but situations to apply them are also rare. And what are high percentage moves? Almost always the foundational techniques. Moves that a beginner learns in a good academy in the first few lessons. In that sense, you do not need 1,000 different techniques. You need 10 techniques that you have practiced 1,000 times. Master those, and you can handle 99% of any challenge. This applies to every sport. There are no magic tricks, no shortcuts. The magic lies in the mundane, the alphabet, the multiplication table. The sandbag offers exactly these fundamentals. It is not expensive. It does not give you the feeling of having bought an advantage with a lot of money. It is a bag. It doesn't shine. The sandbag is not exciting. It is effective. Sandbag strength training prepares you for more in life than machines or dumbbells can. They all have their place, but when it comes to general physical preparedness, as opposed to gym strength, the sandbag as a complete package is unmatched. Because of sandbag strength training, I feel safe in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and this martial art enriches my life immeasurably. That is why the value of the sandbag is comparable to elementary school. The greatest versatility, the most transferable strength is built with the least specialized tool.